Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Once Upon a Time. So first of all, kind of like a little, I guess not really a cosmetic change, but a little changing up a little bit was we had Rumpelstiltskin cutting his hair, which is weird to see with his haircut like that because his hair's been the same way since like season 1. And for one, I've never seen this actor in other stuff either. I'm pretty sure it's Robert Carlyle, right? I've never seen him in other stuff before, so like I don't know, like so it's seeing him with different hairstyle, it just blows my mind. Because even when he was Rumpelstiltskin in the Enchanted Forest, he still kind of had a similar hairstyle, and now you see him with short hair. You know, just because he got tired of seeing his own reflection, just because he got seen, it's just too much for him. I mean, he's making it seem like he's getting a clean break. He's kind of getting a clean start, which interestingly enough, Regina and the Evil Queen kind of said the same thing of like how it makes his eyes pop, which is weird that they both, you know, because he didn't comment on it. He was like, the moment Regina said it the second time, he's like, well, thank you for saying that. It shows you just how much they think alike. He kind of even threw out the fact to Regina. It's like, yeah, you know, the Evil Queen was essentially hitting on me. I wasn't into what she was offering, so, you know, and just, Regina didn't really have any reaction to that, but still, my whole point is, like, he is trying to be a little bit different. He ends up talking to Bella at the end of the episode, and Bella's like, "No, I'm not about that. You saying you changed for me is like I'm done with your BS." She has to keep reminding, "I'm done with your BS. You've lied to me. You manipulated me. I'm not going to keep falling for this over and over again like I have in the past. Giving you a chance. You're not trying to change for me. You're changing for yourself because you're disgusted at your own reflection. You can't stand looking at the man in the mirror." And then, you know, she's like, "I'm still going to stay away from you. Me and our child, like, I will do this on my own. I can't get swept up in with you again." And then, you know, Rumpelstiltskin kind of throws it back at her and be like, "You're going to need me. All right. When it's all, you can pretend all you want that when it's all, but when it's all said and done, you're going to come back to me." It's just like, you know, because that's our baby in there. They're basically saying that baby is a part of him. And that's, you know, as much as she's disgusted with Rumpelstiltskin, no matter what, that baby will have a part of him in it. So then the baby might kind of have his little bit of darkness in it from him, you know. It may not take 100% after Belle. It might take a little bit from him too. So it's kind of throwing out that possibility. So basically, you'll need me. And she's like, "Oh, is that a threat?" He's like, "No, but it will. It's not a threat. It's a necessity. You will need me. So you'll come sooner or later." So that was kind of. But this episode, I've never drawn the comparisons before, but between Hyde and Rumpelstiltskin, there's a lot of similarity. I mean, because we ended up learning Jekyll's story in this episode, which I'm not that familiar with Jekyll and Hyde that much. Especially, I'm sure this show kind of made, obviously, its adaptations to what went down. Like, for instance, like his reasoning for doing the things he did. Maybe it's similar in the original story, but essentially learned that Jekyll basically wanted to join a kind of an academy of scientists, but basically the guy that could give him the position was basically the woman he was infatuated with, Mary. That was her dad, but he didn't like Jekyll because he's basically like, Jekyll's experiments are very dangerous, and they can't have someone like that being a part of the academy. And basically, he ended up meeting with Rumpelstiltskin. Rumpelstiltskin helped him with the serum to kind of bring out that person's kind of like desires and kind of darker side and kind of separating them, kind of creating another personality for him, helped them, and that ended up making Hyde. Now, what I find fascinating about it is the reason why Rumpel did it was for personal reasons. Now, I thought it was like, okay, so Rumpel was trying to get rid of his evil side, you know, it's like get rid of like the dark one while also maintaining his powers. I thought that was what he was aiming for, but it's like, no, he wanted to get rid of his love and compassion because because at that time he was falling in love with Belle. This is what he kind of told Belle. And, you know, he never told anyone his reasons why he worked with Hyde, why he did what he did. And it was for that purpose, which seems even more selfish. You know, it's just because he just wanted to get rid of his feelings because he felt feelings would make him weak. Like I said, me being me, I thought, you know, I kind of thought along the same lines. So the fact is that him being the way he is, like he wanted to get rid of the darkness, but knowing who he is, there's no way he would have wanted to get rid of the power. So I figured he was going to like try and get rid of the darkness and keep the power just because he's so power obsessed. But the comparison is the fact is that they're quote unquote very weak people. Him, like Rumple and Jekyll, are very weak-willed people, and they wanted to be stronger, so they made, they changed themselves. He became the Dark One, and Jekyll became Hyde, because Hyde represented it. Like, and what I liked is kind of like how they represent Hyde. Hyde isn't necessarily just like 100% a darker, like just all the dark stuff about Jekyll. More like the way they phrase it is that basically he's the scars that Jekyll tried to hide. All the stuff about himself that he didn't like showing to people is kind of what Hyde was. And, it's like, oh, hence the name Hyde, because all the stuff that Jekyll was trying to hide away. And it was kind of interesting because in this episode, we also got to see like the difference between them. Like at that point, it's like, oh, Hyde basically was Jekyll without the restrictions. Jekyll was kind of a meek person who didn't really speak his mind and say the things he needed to. Like, for instance, when it came to Mary's dad, who, interestingly enough, I remember I looked up her name before, but I can't remember it now. But that actress who played Mary is the actress who played Valerie on the Vampire Diaries. I was like, I had to take a quick second. I was like, I was like, oh, that's totally her. That's so cool. But nonetheless, it's like he blackmailed her dad because he was like, so yeah, I know that, Jekyll knew that you were having, Jekyll told me that you were having an affair, and basically used that to blackmail him. See, Jekyll knew about the affair, but he could never bring up the courage to actually say like, oh, to use it, for his own gain. But Hyde kind of cut through all that, and was like, no, used it to try and get an advantage. Now, the twist on the story that I really appreciate is the fact is that it's like, oh, you think Hyde is the one that killed Mary or something like that. It's like, oh, yeah, I was in love with, Jekyll's explaining in the bell. He's like, I loved her, but Hyde destroyed it. And I was like, oh, making it seem like Hyde was the one that killed her. But it turns out that's not the case. Actually, she was in love with Hyde. Jekyll was in love with Mary, but Mary didn't feel the same way because essentially everything that Jekyll was trying to get rid of, like all the different side of his heart that he was trying to get rid of, all the passion and desire, kind of separating that from you, it ended up, kind of backfiring because essentially you're casting away the most interesting parts of a person. And that's what Mary found very interesting about Hyde. The fact is that when he walked into a room, he didn't let such things as social class or anything like that bother him. Even the way people looked at him, he cast it all aside because he knows what he wants and he doesn't let anyone kind of stand in his way. And she admired that and ended up falling in love with him for it. But we ended up getting the twist in the story. Once upon a time twist, it wasn't Jekyll. I mean, it wasn't Hyde that killed her. It was Jekyll because he was like, no, you're not supposed to love him. You're supposed to love me. She fell in love with the monster instead of the man. Kind of. Like when you actually look at it, it's kind of a very similar situation to Rumpelstiltskin and Belle. Like I said, I didn't really draw the comparisons until this episode, like just how similar their stories kind of were. I mean, sadly, Hyde's played out a lot worse than Rumpel's. I mean, Rumpel's kind of had his losses and everything, but at least the woman, well, I'm about to say the woman he loves, but I mean, he kind of screwed over his ex-wife, because, I mean, she was basically so upset with him being a coward that she ended up leaving him for Killian. I mean, and then, he killed her, and then he pushed her into the, what was that river of souls in the underworld back in, like, the second half of season 5, so. But still, I mean, at the very least, Belle is okay, in that case, it's like Mary died. I mean, it was an accident, but really it came about because he was unwilling to let her go. He was like, no, there's no way you could love him. Hyde is me. How can you not love me but love him? He's just a creation, and it just, and you kind of saw that darker side of him. And that in itself kind of got, well, first, before I get to Regina, the fact of the matter is, it's like, that sucks because, I mean, because I thought the twist was going to be like, oh, you had this whole situation wrong. Hyde is actually a good guy, but it's like, no, he's still a bad guy too. But the thing is, it kind of, what we ended up finding out is that basically, even when you pull out all the darkness in a person, even that other half still has the potential of darkness because it's not that easy kind of to scrub away, that much darkness in someone's heart. Like, the darkness that's in Hyde is just, you also got to remember they were one. It kind of, because you would think like, okay, when the moment they split, all the darkness that was in Jekyll went into Hyde. But you do forget the fact is they were once one person. So you kind of forget like all the darkness that's in Hyde was once in Jekyll, but it's kind of like it doesn't matter because like, oh, they're separate people, but it's like it does matter because even when they're separated, a little bit of that darkness still exists and it will kind of grow back. And so he even tried hurting Belle, which is kind of like, holy crap, like, because Belle kind of figured that out pretty quickly from his story and everything. But it turns out the only way to kind of kill a doppelganger, in this case, you had, in Hyde's case, was killing Jekyll, because, Killian showed up in the nick of time. Thank goodness he gave Belle that shell to kind of contact him, but showed up and, inadvertently ended up killing Jekyll, which then ended up killing Hyde because they are connected and whatnot. So that kind of puts it in Regina's head. It's like both things. One, darkness can't go away that easily. That the only way she can get rid of the evil queen is by dying. So both those things kind of coincide, and now Regina's left thinking like, basically she makes Emma make the promise that Regina had to make the Emma back in season 5 when they were in Camelot. It's like, you told me that I had to be the one to do what was right to kind of protect your family, like when you were the Dark One. So I want you to make that promise to me. And then Emma's like, I don't want it to come to that, but Regina's like, please promise me. So Emma promises her, which that could go different ways. Like I said, it could easily like I said, I feel like they're pointing it too hard at it being Regina the one that ends up killing Emma. I think they're pushing that too hard for it to be her. I think this whole story is kind of to push you into believing that, because maybe that's what it could ultimately be. Is the fact is that Regina kind of turns into her evil self because that darkness kind of regrew itself, that it never completely washed away, which kind of it sucks. I feel like it took a very interesting turn. Like the fact is that darkness doesn't go away in you, so that it wasn't a matter of like, I kept bringing it up. I think it's going to end with her fusing back with the evil queen. That's kind of the only way to get rid of him. Maybe that's what happens, or maybe we get up in a situation where it's like, oh, we have both evil queens, or maybe there's a situation where Regina ends up reverting back to the evil queen. And she ends up killing the doppelganger evil queen or something like that, or they team up together. I don't know. There's so many different possibilities of where that could go. And it just, I don't know. It was a very interesting episode with a lot of developments in that front. So it just blows my mind that Jekyll was kind of a bad guy. I mean, he was a little bit of a douche when you actually look at it, because like he got Leroy. He was like, oh, could you get me a sandwich from Granny's? And Leroy's like, what? We're dwarves. We're warriors. We're not, you're just errand boys. Got the sandwich. He's like, okay, here's your sandwich. All right. You don't realize how important we are. We here, we protect the kingdom. We dwarves, we're kind of the last line of defense against chaos. And then the evil queen shows up and he's like, all right, bring it on. Ends up get him, and the other kind of ends up getting, which I'm assuming it was the one with glasses, so I'm assuming that's Doc. Ended up kind of getting put to sleep immediately. So I was like, poor dwarves. It's just like, they never have 100% of a victory. It's just always kind of like, things always kind of fall apart with them. So it's kind of sad. I mean, because I was really shocked when we ended up finding out, like, kind of trailing a little bit, when the whole situation where it's like, oh, Rumpel goes up and stabs him. I was like, I know this isn't going to work out in some shape or form. And he grabs the knife. I'm like, oh, it definitely didn't work out in your favor. Because it turns out, it's like, oh, the reason why it didn't work is because he had already switched the potions out. Which I was like, oh crap, you have Hyde here with Rumpelstiltskin's dagger. It's like now he has control of the Dark One. And I was just like, because he wanted to, like, he was there watching Jekyll about to do what he was about to do to Belle, and he wasn't letting Rumpel do anything. I guess because it was his way of kind of paying Rumpel back, because Rumpel ended up, didn't let his story kind of play out, essentially, because he ended up sending Hyde off to the land of untold stories, and he had, like, for Hyde, he had lost Mary, so I guess he was trying to pay Rumpel back by making him lose Belle. Because another thing, too, is the fact is that Rumpelstiltskin can't actually kill Hyde, prior to that, prior to Spirit putting the serum on the blade. Obviously, it ended up being fake and whatnot, but he tried choking him. But so I was wondering why that didn't work. Was it because the Evil Queen put a spell on him, just like, or was it kind of a similar situation? Well, I'm sitting here, I'm thinking about, I'm an idiot. Because even the Evil Queen said it herself, it's the same reason why Regina couldn't kill her. It's because the doppelgangers can't be killed. I mean, we see that the only way they can die is by means of, hey, you need to kill the original to kill the doppelganger. But he was about to tell Rumpelstiltskin to do something, around the time Jekyll was dying. So I'm curious what he was going to make him do. And also, side note, I bet you Rumpel kind of regrets not crush, or I'm sure even Regina kind of regrets not letting Rumpel crush Jekyll's heart when he had a chance. He was like, threatening him. It's like, the Evil Queen promised to leave Belle alone if I made sure not to come after her with this serum. So the serum possibly would have worked. I mean, we'll never know, because the only person that can make it was Jekyll, but he's gone now, so I don't know. And Hyde smashed the only serum that was left, and all other, material, because he smashed everything else in the lab, so there's no way for, I guess, the group to even try and pick up Jekyll's stuff to kind of, his research and stuff to kind of figure out how to do it again. I mean, maybe they'll be able to find some of his research and kind of do that, but I mean, I guess we'll just have to wait and see on that front. It's so much, like, that just trips me out so much that it played out like that, Jekyll being kind of a bad guy himself, because you always just thought he was like, even though he is weak, and, it's because he's such a meek person that, he harbored all this darkness in him that is just kind of like, he felt like, I deserve this, I deserve that, I deserve love, I deserve to be in the academy, and it's just that need, like, it's like he tried so hard to separate himself from his passions and his desires, but it's like, by doing so, I feel like he ended up inadvertently making them kind of completely control him. I mean, it makes you wonder, would things have worked out differently if he had stayed whole, if he had not divided himself, like, even if him and Hyde were different people occupying the same body, would things have worked out that way? I'm curious. Because even after he killed Mary, he drank the potion and turned himself into Hyde. So, because he didn't want to be blamed for the crime, he wanted Hyde to be blamed about it. But it's like, no matter what, even if you're two separate personalities, you still did it, so. And that was kind of an interesting thing, too, that Hyde and Jekyll actually shared a memory, too. It's like, because I brought up the fact that he was trying to blackmail Mary's father, but I didn't know it worked like that. I thought, like, with one kind of unconscious, well, one kind of side goes unconscious when the other one's awake, but they still maintain the memories of the other one. I guess that's how it worked. Or maybe they occupy the same, like, time. I don't know. I'm not about to delve down into that road, but it's going to be very confusing. Anyway, also in this episode, we had Snow White's side of the story where she's like, oh, I'm back to teaching and whatnot. And she ends up getting a new, she gets a teacher assistant who immediately I was like, is that, like, especially when she brought up the story about the princess that let her kingdom down, wasn't there to protect them or save them. I was like, it's like, you are the princess that you're talking about in the story, obviously. And I was like, you're Jasmine, aren't you? Turns out, yeah, she is Jasmine, because apparently she's here looking for Aladdin, because Snow White asked her, like, okay, what do you, like, essentially, the people from the land of untold stories come from kingdoms where kind of the princess kind of let them. Now she kind of used, inadvertently, without revealing herself as Jasmine, used herself as an example that she wasn't strong enough to be there for her people. That basically Snow needed to kind of show them how she does things as a princess. Like, it's not just trying to teach them any old she performed, like showing them how she as Snow White does things, and it's like she's teaching them Newton's law. One reaction has an equal and opposite reaction, doing it the way she does, like with her bow skills and everything. So, but what I'm very curious, I mean, maybe we'll get this next episode, because I've already seen the previews where it kind of shows Aladdin, like, I mean, in future episode stuff, like, I've seen pictures and stuff like that, so I already knew it's coming up. So maybe next episode we get Aladdin's side of the story, because Aladdin's also a savior in Agrabah, so meeting him might help Emma, or make things worse for Emma, because it's like, he kind of fell apart when it came to being a savior, and maybe, like, to Emma, maybe Emma will try to compensate, being like, okay, he failed, so I gotta try extra hard not to fail, essentially. It's like pushing her hardest not to, I mean, because Emma has a tendency to overcompensate, because, she's the savior and everything, so she has to try twice as hard just to kind of prove herself, to prove her worth, prove who she is, still struggling with the whole identity crisis, so. But it's going to be interesting to find out what happened to make, Jasmine, like, why she's hiding her identity, why that's such a big deal, why hide yourself as Jasmine? I mean, because she's looking for Aladdin and everything. So does that mean Jafar's here too? I mean, because last time we saw there was, Henry and them had completed a list of all the different people who had come from the land of untold stories. Now as you think about it, that's like the second, technically third person from the land of untold stories that's died, because we had the Count of Monte Cristo dying, was that last episode, the episode before last or whatever. So now we have Jekyll and Hyde. That might send the wrong message when you're at the thing. It's like, oh, 3 people from the land of untold story are dead. So now which one of us is next? They claim themselves to be good guys, but who's to say they won't try and turn on us next or something? I mean, that could be a possibility. I'm super excited because there's so many possibilities of where this might go. Like I said, especially because, fact of the matter is, like I said, once upon a time, especially subsequently since, what was it, this third season, I don't think they did in the second season, but definitely in the third season, they kind of split the seasons between, okay, the first half of the season is this one particular story. Like in case of season 4, it's the first half was about Frozen, the second half dealt with the 3 villains, in season 5, it was Camelot / the Dark One, and the second half about the Underworld. So I'm very curious, what stories will develop from this first half of the season. So, but I mean, that's just getting too far into the future. I'm just really super excited to see where the story unfolds next episode. It's just, so interesting. I still want to see. I'm probably out of any relationship. Well, not just relationship speaking, how things are going to work with Zelena, between her, the Evil Queen, and Regina, how that's all going to play out. It makes you wonder, will Regina tell her that truth that okay, the Evil Queen will die if I die. So maybe it'll be a situation where Zelena has to choose between the Evil Queen and Regina, type of thing. Who knows? And also, we didn't get any look at it this episode, but let's not forget about David / Prince Charming's need for revenge, for getting revenge against his dad, pretending everything's normal, even though he told Snow he's going to burn that letter. Well, the evidence he had is connected to the person who did it and whatnot. So I guess we'll be seeing that in maybe next episode, just sometime in the near future, because I'm very curious to see how that all plays out. So far, a very, very good season, and I just cannot wait to see where things progress from here. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.